Hey guys, so we are here with Allyson Schwab, Doug Schwab's wife, and Doug is the head coach at the University of Northern Iowa, and we're going to ask her a few questions. Okay, so how did you and Doug meet?
Oh gosh. Well, we met at a bar. And the funny thing is we were both at Virginia Tech. He was coaching at that point and I was a student athlete. So we didn't know at the time when we met and everything that we would, date and go on to dating and everything. And the university would end up telling us, no, you can't date, because he was a coach and I was an athlete, even though it was different teams and different genders and everything. But we may have hit it, for the rest of the year. But it was awesome. I mean, it was 100%, I feel like, supposed to happen. There's an age gap between us of about 8 years. So there was some hoops we had to kind of jump through just to be able to navigate that, and me being so ignorant and young and naive, and him having a little bit more life experience. So he probably put up with a lot of more stuff than I had to. And but it was funny. I mean, it was really fun. So
That's awesome. So with that being said, what was your first official date like?
Oh gosh, I think we went to eat, and I'm pretty sure it was like IHOP or something, And I laugh because the reason why I remember this is, your first date, you're trying to keep your cool and everything, and our food took forever, like 30 minutes or 40 minutes, and I almost lost it on the waitress, and so that was his first little inclination that I had a little bit of a spirited side, spicy, probably where my daughter gets it from. And so that was probably our first one.
That's awesome. Okay, so what was your wrestling background prior to meeting Doug?
So it really wasn't a huge background. I worked the state tournament in Virginia a few years because my friend Haley, her dad was a ref, and we would go and work kind of behind the scenes, do the programs, everything leading up to the tournament. And then high school that were wrestlers that we hung out with and would go and watch their meets, but it wasn't like I grew up in it. So I was pretty, naive to just the extent that he was wrestling, because he was already wrestling internationally when I met him. And he had Tom Brands that was the head coach at Virginia Tech then, which was a big change for Virginia Tech and the intensity of it. And so I learned a lot that year, I'll say, and continuing on, I learned a lot.
Yeah. So you say that was when Doug had, just around the time that Doug had first started wrestling internationally. So what was one of the hardest moments for you to watch Doug go through as a significant other, whether it was girlfriend or wife, and what was your routine to cope with the stress?
Well, by far the hardest was the Olympics. You reach the pinnacle of the sport of which you've trained your entire life to reach, and then you don't reach your goal of winning. So it was extremely hard. And you don't know how they're going to cope. And so I probably was a little bit quiet at first and just kind of tried to gauge his reaction. Doug's usually pretty mellow and handles things really well, but that was that was a strong hurt. I mean, you really don't understand everything that's gone into it. And I came in at a point, we met in 2005, so he made the Olympic team in 2008. So I'm only really 3 years into his training, where we're surrounded by people that have been there all 31 years. And I think that was the hardest thing, coming back and trying to regroup from it. And I think he felt like he let down a lot of people. And for the longest time, we probably didn't talk about it. And for the longest time, we didn't talk about it even with our kids. I mean, they just had no knowledge of it for ever. And as he grew older and wiser and, more in his coaching career and everything, I tried to remind him when I could, this is going to be something that you're going to be able to use from this experience, and you're going to be able to use it to better your athletes, talk about failure, even though I didn't feel like he failed, but I know that he probably felt like that because he didn't reach his goal. And, but I definitely think I probably could have coped a little bit better. You know, I was 20 some years old and a new mom, and, you know, I mean, I had just never probably trained at the level that he had. So I don't think that if you haven't trained at that level, you can't fully grasp what they lose when they don't reach a goal. I mean, you just can't. It's just not the same. Even when you feel like you think that you could possibly understand, like, you just can't. You know, I mean, everything that went into it, you think about missed family moments. You think about our wedding was scheduled in Iowa so that it didn't prevent him, you know, to miss any training. You think about the early mornings and the late nights. You think about the meals that I didn't know whether to fix or not because I didn't know what he wanted to eat and where his weight was and what he needed for his body to feel the best. Or we had Hayden that February before the Olympics in August, and I bet you every night that I sat up and fed that child, I prayed for, you know, Doug to compete well, and prayed for just him to stay healthy through all that process and everything. And so when you come back, I mean, you're a little mad. You know, I wasn't mad at him. I was just mad at the situation. Like, here's a guy who's done everything right. He doesn't drink. He's never done drugs. He, you know, trained, followed his coaches, everything they said, trained where they asked him to, trained how they asked him to. And then you think about a little bit of missed opportunities or things that you gave up. And it's hard not to be a little bit bitter. But looking back on it, I think of like all the things that we were able to experience from the people that we met, how, and Doug talks about it all the time, how the Olympics bring so many people together. So the opportunities that we had, the ability to take Hayden out to the training center and watch him practice or you know prepare for practice and travel with him during those times, and the fact that we were able to take his family, you know, members and me all the way to China. I mean, it's huge. And so I try to look at those things, the things that came out of it, and that I know that we'll be able to use that experience for other people that go through it. And but that by far was probably the hardest thing, watching him go through.
Absolutely. I like how you say the experiences are one of your favorite parts of that, because you're right, that will help people in so many ways, probably in ways that we can't even think of.
Right.
And that's awesome that you guys were able to take the positive away from a negative and still run with it and still find ways to help people with it.
Yeah. We try to do our best, like, doing that. I mean, it's definitely hard. You have people that sit behind a computer screen and can say anything that they want, comment on videos, message boards, you know, and I think some people thought he was done before he even made that team. And so that was hard because I really felt like he was in his prime. And so you're kind of dealing with that a little bit. The people that were like, oh, I told you so, or, you know, it should have been this person. And I fully think that he was supposed to be where he was supposed to be. It wasn't like he just laid there and lost. I mean, he lost to the silver and bronze medalists that year. But
talk about a bad draw.
he would never, I mean, and I know that because he would be like, that's excuses, you know, he would never say that. But when I'm talking to like our kids and things, you know, I tell them that. So
yeah, because I mean that's
I mean it was tough, and he got pulled back in. He lost his first match. He got pulled back in because that guy made the finals, and then ended up losing to the guy that, I think, the Indian that went on to win the bronze medal. So I mean, but the experience itself, I told him, you know, you represented your country. You walked out at the opening ceremonies. I mean, not many people can say they've ever done that, much less, you know.
Yeah.
So,
and let's also not forget that he had to beat the best guys in the United States to make the team to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like you're just given this opportunity to represent the United States. You have to earn it.
Yeah. And that year, I mean, it was crazy. He won the Open that year, and the people that he beat were just, I mean, I think we even looked back, Tion Ware and like Jared Lawrence, Jared Frayer, I want to say maybe Bono or Zadig, maybe Zadig, I think, to even get to win the finals or whatever, and then you came back in June for best 2 out of 3, and it was just different then too. I mean, I feel like the age of the competitors was older. You know, you had that core group of guys that was in their late 20s, early 30s. You didn't have a ton of young guys on the senior circuit.
Yeah, so still in college.
Yes.
Taking Olympic red shirts.
Exactly. So it was a big difference.
That's crazy. So you, like you mentioned, you are from Virginia, and how did you cope with the stress of being this far away from home and your family?
Well, I say like the best advice was I got involved, any way I could. So for me, that was going to meets, traveling to meets, and thankfully I had some women around me, Jenny Brands and Kathy Gable and Michelle Brands, who really kind of took me under their wing and kept me involved and just gave me advice. I mean, they had been there where you had a spouse that was coaching and competing, where their training was like the number one priority, and it's a selfish time in their life. And to be at that level, they have to be selfish. So coming from a non-wrestling family and probably being a little bit immature in my age and a first-time mom, and you're trying to control every situation, it was hard, but they thankfully were really good about helping walk me through those seasons. And I built a family here, with them. And so then that way, even though my family was so far away, we had Doug's family that was 2 hours away when we were in Iowa City, and an hour away now. And then we had my family would come out, or I would travel back home, but we built a family within our wrestling family.
That's awesome. That's one of the good things about wrestling. You can build a family around it.
Exactly.
So, how was the transition from Doug being an assistant coach at the University of Iowa to the head coach at the University of Northern Iowa? And how much of a difference did you see in Doug with that transition?
I would definitely say the biggest transition was like time. I mean, how much time, I didn't even realize probably how much time went into like the head coaching position. Just the things that you're required to be at, or need to be at, or need to show up at, that I just wasn't even realize how much it was. At any one point, you think, like, we still have people ask, like, oh, does he teach a class? And I'm like, no. It's not high school. Like, I mean, he has guys come in the morning, or they have a lift, and then he's reviewing video, and, or administration. You're meeting with administration, you're meeting with marketing, you have donors come in. And, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I think that's what people don't really realize, is that how much goes into that side of it. If he could have his choice, he would 100% be in the room all the time. But that's not how that works, As far as him, I saw him grow like exponentially. At first it was a little bit hard because of the difference in time. Our boys were 1 and 2 at the time, so you're talking about boys that are super active, and I was alone and a lot, just because when he first got the job up here, he was traveling back and forth. So we kind of figured out a housing situation and everything. So that was a little bit hard. He would leave before they get up, and he would be home after they got to bed. And I would probably look exhausted, still looking exhausted. But I saw him grow so much. The biggest thing was probably like hearing him speak. He's way better at speaking than I am. But it just watching him, like, that's my favorite thing. Like, I love hearing him speak, press conferences or to crowds of people or whatever. I think that he is really able to show his passion for this sport through how he talks and how he shows his energy. And I'm sure some people are probably taken back at certain times and think like he's super intense all the time, and he's not. But when it comes to wrestling, I mean, and you're passionate about what you do and you have that deep down love for it, then it's going to just like ooze out of you in those situations, and those are my favorite situations. So
I like how you say it just oozes out, because I agree. You can tell when somebody's very passionate and loves the sport. Like, That's a good feeling. So I imagine that's probably a very wonderful feeling
Yep.
for you to watch. So you've mentioned that you guys have kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. And the boys we know are a lot older than the girls.
Yep.
So when did the boys first realize that their dad was kind of a big deal in wrestling?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I think this is hilarious. We never really talked about it. Doug was just, I mean, it probably within the last 3 years is the first time that we've had anything up in our house, and it's in the basement. So like,
it's not even like in the living
no,
room.
like no one even sees it except for the guys maybe if they're there for a team meal. And I remember because we were getting ready for a team meal, and I brought out his trophy like when he won his national championship, and I set it on this shelf, and it's like, I mean, this bookshelf. So we've got tons of books, and I just kind of like put it in the corner, you know? And all of a sudden it was gone. And I'm like, no, he did not take this off. And so I went kind of looking around, and it's like in the storage room. Are you serious? So then I bring it back out. Like it becomes like this funny thing where it's like the traveling trophy we can't find, you know? So I put it back up
Hiding it
there,
from
right?
each other.
And I was like, do not touch that. Like, you know, you have a lot to be proud of, and these guys need to see that you're proud of your accomplishments, that it is a big deal, that you worked hard to get there. Like, you should be proud of that. And he's just never been a me guy. Like, he's never been a show off, me, or I want to show you my accolades, because he 100% agrees that accolades only get you so far, right? Like, they might get your foot in the door, but it doesn't mean that you can be a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that you're a good person.
Yeah,
I mean, anything.
No, for sure.
So, you know, he's just never been one to show those off. And so eventually I got it back up there. And then only to find that his third place trophy got moved to the front, and like the national championship was like in the back. And I was like, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I mean, and then, you know, it occurred to me, like, and he always says, like, I mean, that was probably one of the hardest things. You fighting back for third at nationals, I mean, it's a long road.
Yeah.
It's a lot of matches.
Yeah.
So,
it is.
I mean, it's something to be extremely proud of. So,
And then you end the tournament with
Yes,
a win.
right.
Which is,
exactly, you know, ending on those odd numbers. So, but now he did put, like, we put his, I think, octagon up from when he won the U.S. Open, and I told him, I said, you should put that up. You practically ripped it out of the ref's hands. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you had waited so long, and I watched it. I laughed so hard afterwards, and I said, God, like, did you
really
realize
wanted
that, like, you literally ripped it out of the ref's hands? And he's like, I waited a long time for that octagon. And, I mean, anyone knows their story of, like, him and his brother competing when they were little, and how him and his brother would wrestle, and one would be, like, USA, and one would be Russia, or something like that. And, you know, Doug would be winning the whole time. And, you know, Mark's, like, 10 years older than Doug or something. So Doug would be winning the whole time, and then Mark would do something and beat him, and then make Doug stand there with a paper plate. So he had been waiting on that octagon for a really long time. So now there's a few things. Oh yeah, while they like played the national anthem and stuff. I mean, like, it was like an award ceremony.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, so he had been waiting for that octagon a very long time. But anyways, I got off subject. Our boys still probably don't know the extent. And the reason why I say that, it was maybe 2 years ago, and we were still working on their composure and their basement battles, and before we let them wrestle competitively. And Hendrix, he would get to the point where, like, sometimes he would get so frustrated and he just want to be done, and we were trying to get him pushing through that to where he wouldn't give up. He would just, you know, keep wrestling even if he was down, even if Hayden was beating him. So he had this great basement battle where, like, he fought back and didn't give up, and we were like, oh my gosh, we're turning the corner. And so that night I showed him the match, Doug versus Guerrero, and Doug's down and then ends up, you know, turning around, beating Guerrero. And it's like one of the loudest matches in Carver history. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? Like, it's my favorite match ever. So
it was crazy. We actually just watched it 2 weeks ago.
It is awesome. So he's watching it, and he turns to me and he goes, so Dad was like ranked? No, he said, was Dad even ranked? And I almost lost it, because I'm like, oh my gosh, you have no concept of. I was like, yes, honey, your dad was ranked. And, you know, I mean, so, but that's a tribute to Doug, that he really he doesn't talk about it, and he doesn't want them to feel like they need to live up to anything. You know, they're their own person. And so he's just never really spoken about it. Probably in the last like 2 years or so, or even last night we were like playing Uno with the kids and one of them said something and he like answered a question and Hayden was like, you never really talk about it. And Doug's like, well, I mean, what's there to talk about? And Hayden's like, well, I want to hear stories. You know, so I mean, they're getting to the point now where they can actually understand and understand how big of a deal it was. Like they think they asked him like, you know, how many times he won like Big Tens. And he was like 3. And for the first time ever, he extended off of that because he was talking about how Ironside, I think, had won like the 4 years before that, and Doug won 3 years, and then whoever was behind Doug, and I can't remember right now, had won like the next year. So for something like 8 years at 141, I believe, it was like, you know, Iowa had won the Big Ten championship, you know, at that weight. And so that was like the first time I've seen him extend upon what they asked. So I think we're getting to the point where he realizes they appreciate it a lot more and they can understand it. And so therefore he's willing to share a little bit more if they ask.
Share those life lessons.
Yes.
That's awesome. So you did mention that the boys are wrestling. So is it more difficult for the boys wrestling and having the last name Schwab?
I probably think about it more than they do. I will say when we first, like maybe when Hendrix was 7, he said something like, I don't want to be like Dad. And we were kind of talking about wrestling. And I was like, whoa, like your dad's a good person. Like, let's, you know, clear this. And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, you don't want to like wrestle like Dad? And he was like, yeah. And I said, like, you don't want to feel like you have to do what Dad did. And he was like, yeah. And so that was the first time that I realized, like, wow, you kind of maybe pick up on like the pressure of it a little bit. And Hendrix has always been just a way more aware of that sort of thing than Hayden has, and he's the younger one. So it just was interesting to me. And then as we moved forward, though, we always really worked on not making things a big deal. You know, so no one's going to remember what you did at state when you were 10. They're not. You know, when it comes down to it. No one's going to remember unless there's a flow film later on in life at some point and they go back, or someone digs up some, you know, bracket to see that they're like all these studs were in this one, like we've done before at Fargo. I mean, no one's going to remember. So why do you have any pressure on yourself? You don't. Like your job is to go out and give the best effort and have the best attitude. And that is what we've spent our time working on them. You know, we want them to love the sport so that they'll turn around and give back to the sport.
I like that. I like that that's the word you chose. Love the sport so they can get back to it. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. So do you think that other people outside of your group have expectations for the boys because of their dad's accomplishments?
I don't know. I feel weird kind of saying, you know, like if, I don't know what other people think. I do think that it will be something as they get older, the name will just be recognized, you know? So somebody, I'm sure you'll have some of those people that are like, oh, you beat Doug Schwab's kid. I mean, it's just going to happen. And the reason why I say that is not because I think we're so cool or Doug's so cool, but I watched Tom Brand's daughter go through it. You know, I mean, we went to watch one of her wrestling matches when she wrestled when she was younger, and you could just see that they were almost scouting her, you know?
Yeah.
And it stands out, obviously, if like Doug were in the corner. I mean, he's recognized, especially for the state of Iowa.
Yeah.
I mean, so probably a little bit of that, but I just don't worry about it. I really try to keep them around the people that have the best possible life goals for them. You know, I mean, we're lucky enough that we're part of a club that Immortals that has coaches that have been around Doug. You know, that they also believe in our same beliefs of the longevity of the sport. And that's what we want our kids in. We want them to like love the sport. I mean, that's really what we want. And want to go out there and compete. Because when kids are younger, the first thing they do is they go out there for you. Yeah. I mean, that's why they're out there.
Yeah.
So we wanted them to reach the point where they wanted to be out there for them. And so I'm sure that still probably teeter-totters on that a little bit. They want to still please Dad or me or their coaches. But a little bit of that is not bad. I mean, that's, you know, that they want to go out there and fight for you. But the reason why they do that is because of the relationships they've built with their coaches, you know, their father and everything. So
Absolutely. I like that you say it's about the relationships too. Again, because it's not always about winning and losing. It's more about what you're getting from it as a whole. And I like that you guys are instilling that in your boys. So, on a different note, if you could go back before your relationship with Doug and tell yourself one piece of advice for your relationship with Doug, what would it be?
Oh gosh, probably the biggest thing is, and I do a better job of it now, like telling other people, he only had a certain amount of time. Like they have such a small window to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. Let them. I mean, really, unless something, I'm not saying give up what you want to do completely, and I didn't, but my path changed, based on it, and I get asked that a lot, probably by our oldest child the most, well, do you still wish that you were in the medical field or did this? And I'm like, I miss that part of it, like learning, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and so I guess not being afraid to let them chase their goal, that it really is not going to have the impact that you think, like that you're going to have to give up everything that you have to give up. It may be for a short time that you give up meals together and time spent together, but if you're creative and you work it out, then you're also going to get things like traveling together. I mean, whether that's just to the open or somewhere, across, the world. But the experience is 100% I would take over any of like the hardships. So my biggest thing would be really just nothing's a big deal like you think it is, that you're missing out on, or that I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to like describe it. Like in my head, I can see what I want to say, but I don't know. I just remember. I remember Michelle Brands telling me when Terry was competing how she wished that like she had left for a while, let him compete, like really focus on it. Not left, but like just like gone visit family, that kind of thing. And I wish that I had done that too. I wish that I had, before he left for the Olympics or whatever, that I had just taken Hayden and gone home for a while, like really let him focus. And not that I felt like we took away from that, and he assures me that we added to it, if anything.
Yeah.
But I wish that I had just probably handled some of the situations just a little bit better. Probably not been as like, I need time with you, or needy, or wanting to be around him, or complain about an extra practice. I just wish that I would have been able to say, hey, this is for a short period of time, what he wants to accomplish, so just let him work towards that. You have the rest of your life with him, so let him work towards that. So
I think that's a good piece of advice. Yeah. So what is something about Doug that most people do not know?
Okay, so I'm going to tell a story because I think it's the funniest story ever. In 2007, he was leaving the hotel for like the championship round to make the world team. And we get to the place, and he had roomed with Metcalf. So we get to the convention center, and all of a sudden, Doug's missing a shoe. And so we're like, where could your shoe be? Like, it fell out in the road somewhere. So Metcalf ran back and got his shoe, warmed up Doug for the finals, and then came and sat with me and just let me beat the crap out of him during the whole match and be nervous for all three, the best 2 out of 3 matches. And so I'm very thankful for Metcalf for that. But that's probably a story that most people like don't know, that he lost his shoe before finals of the World Team Trials in 2007. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Who loses their shoe?
I know. Oh my gosh. And then Metcalf reminded me that the next time that they wrestled, like Doug's shoe came off and Metcalf like threw it. Told him that he needs to like tie his shoes tighter or something. But so those two spent a lot of time together, and I think it's interesting. Like now, you would probably never have them in the same room, and we roomed with Metcalf all the time during that time, and probably 2007 especially. I think they roomed together like both times, and then they're in the same bracket.
Yeah.
I mean, that they could easily face each other, but
being friends and competitors.
Yeah. They were great workout partners. And then you had like the coach athlete aspect, you know, where Doug was coaching him, and I knew Metcalf obviously from Virginia Tech. So when he came out here, and then I came out here, it's just kind of funny, like that, you know, we knew each other from when we were at Tech. So yeah,
the dynamic is, there's so many different
layers to that.
I know.
But we love their family, and his wife's one of my best friends, and so we're really lucky to still just, you know, be around them and have our families grow up together.
That's amazing. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having
appreciate
me.
it. Yes.